Good morning, everybody. Thank you. I think we need to go ahead and get started. So if you want to find a seat, there are plenty of them down in the front here. And I was told that there are a few $20 bills that are under a couple of the chairs down here. So you got to sit in it to check it out. I want to welcome everybody to the 2017 National Cooperative Soil Survey Conference. And what we're going to be doing this morning is hearing from some of the folks that have been responsible for helping to put this on. And before we introduce the first speaker, I'd like to make a couple of announcements. A number of people have asked about posters. And Christy informs me that the poster boards are arriving this morning, and so probably sometime around mid-morning, early afternoon, we'll be able to put the posters up, and they're going to be in the Aspen room, which is somewhere in here. This is a pretty confusing place. They do have maps available, and you find them very helpful. The other important item, Christy asked me to mention, restrooms. All you have to do is go out these doors, hang a right, go down the hall, make your first left, and you'll see them right there on your left. So I am pleased to introduce the first speaker this morning, Curtis Elke. He is state conservationist for Idaho. And Curtis, please come on up. Got what you need here?
All right, thanks, Paul. Well, good morning, everybody. That's what I like to hear, some enthusiasm out there. Cool, good. And I have the honor and the privilege to welcome you this morning, and it truly is an honor to be amongst friends and fellow soil scientists. I'm a soil scientist as well, believe it or not. I'm not dressing the part today, but I am a soil scientist from North Dakota State University is where I graduated from. That's my home, North Dakota. I've traveled the country abroad. This is my fifth state that I officially have worked in. And it's just, it's great to see you all. Welcome to Idaho. It's a wonderful, wonderful state. A lot of diversity in our state, as I'm sure some of you have already experienced and witnessed. For some of you that were out on the tour yesterday and I was out there with you, you all clean up pretty well. You look pretty good, all of you. So again, good morning and welcome. It's a great pleasure in hosting this year's National Cooperative Soil Survey Conference. Idaho is welcoming representatives from practically every state here this morning. And I've learned over time, traveling abroad across the country, that we got a lot in common. And when scientists and conservationists come together like this, we like to talk about conservation and getting it on the ground. And we all have the same goal, the same purpose, and the common denominator that I've found traveling across the country is that we all have an incredible passion for what we do. We love to work together, we love to help people, help the land, and that's what we do. So it's really a neat opportunity, but also an incredible responsibility that we hold as conservationists as well in getting conservation on the ground and helping our communities abroad. So Dr. Hugh Hammond Bennett, our NRCS Father of Conservation, he, in an article here from the 1946 article, still stands true. And I'd like to read just something real short here for you guys here from Hugh Hammond Bennett. Some things never change over time. And it's rather interesting. I was given, which is really neat, I thought anyway, the Journal of Soil and Water Conservation, and it's actually volume 1, number 1. And it's pretty awesome here. But Hugh Hammond Bennett talks about a national program for soil conservation. And he says this. He says, people here in the United States and in many other countries are learning that we must have soil conservation if we are to have continuous, abundant agriculture production. We are fast learning, too, that it must be effective conservation the kind that will keep our land permanently productive. Effective soil conservation is a result of intelligent use of the land resource. This may mean contour cultivation and terracing to hold soil and conserve rainfall. It may mean seeding grass and planting trees to meet the needs of bare, steep slopes or of shallow soil overlaying rock. It may mean grass or surface mulch to protect fields from wind erosion. It may even mean changing the rotation to increase soil productivity and so on. Productive land, which all of us, city and country people alike, live from our nation's most important resource. It is indispensable to the welfare of every one of us, industry and labor and professional people, as well as farmers, have an all-important stake in the country's good land. People today are all rightly concerned about America's indispensable resources of land and water. They have come to realize, as never before, that these basic assets are inseparably linked directly to the present welfare and future security of the United States. So, way back in 1946, these words were first spoken by Dr. Hugh, Hammond, Bennett, and we still stand by these words and the importance of our natural resources. And I just thought it was very appropriate to share some of his words with all of you as well. And it's kind of a reminder that we need to continue to work together. So we all remember the photos from the Dust Bowl era of the 1930s, the iconic shots of the massive black clouds forming over communities, farmhouses and ranches, and unforgettable intensive farming practice starting during the World War I era. Without erosion reducing techniques combined with sustained period of drought created one of the worst natural disasters in our nation's history, as we all recall. And in response to disaster, the federal government created the Soil Conservation Service as part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1935. 42 years strong we are. The feds pushed for states to enact laws and create local conservation districts to manage and improve conservation efforts at the local level. So one thing I love to talk about, and being a state conservationist, I've been here in Idaho now for a little over 2 years and a couple months. Some of you I've had the privilege to work with. I've worked in North Dakota, South Dakota. I've worked in Oklahoma, where I was a soil conservationist and district conservationist. I've worked in Massachusetts as the assistant for operations. And then I've done a couple details as well in Washington, D.C. and Arizona. So I've traveled the country. I've learned a lot of different resources, natural resources, and it's vastly different from east to west, north to south. Kind of like what Idaho's like, vastly different from north to south as well. But one of the things that I love about being a state conservationist, another thing is for NRCS Idaho, besides being a public servant, is the opportunity to work with all of you and to be part of a collaborative relationship with so many conservation-minded people who share the same passion for conservation as my family and I do. I have 2 children who also work for the agency. My daughter, she's a tribal liaison district conservationist up in Havre, Montana, works for the Rocky Boy tribe. And then also my son, he's a soil conservationist in Tule Lake, California. And so I feel honored. I'm very proud of my children as well and what they've accomplished in their life. And all I can say is I better retire soon before they become my boss. But while not a feature of Idaho, our state has extensive public lands abutting private lands. 60% of Idaho landscape is public lands. These public lands are managed by 3 primary agencies, the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Idaho Department of Lands. We are working with these agencies very, very closely and others to learn each other's needs, amiable resources and processes, and that way NRCS can better coordinate with them and help our producers with consistent and collaborative technical assistance. And you all are well aware, the current administration is exactly what they're asking all of us to do, is to work together across all landscapes, and utilizing each other's resources, creating more efficiency out there in the federal government system. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're finding a lot of our partners, which are numbered 40 plus here in Idaho, that we deal with in a very close manner. It gets challenging at times, but rather than stepping over each other, we want to walk down the street together. And so that's encouraging that we have the partnerships that we do in Idaho, and the willingness to work together as we do. So in the last 2 years, our Team Idaho, which we have a few in the room here, and I'm very proud of my team here in Idaho as well. We have some amazing staff and technical adequacy, and we got our state soil scientist right here in the room, Sean Neal. Does a fine job. We recruited him out of Alaska, and Sean's doing a great job, and thank you, Sean. So in the last 2 years, our Team Idaho has identified several special projects that range from forest management, fire prevention, and recovery to soil health. And all the benefits provide to low elevation sprinklers, reducing water usage, and meeting Idaho's soil and water conservation goals. I don't know if any of you know, but Idaho is the second largest food commodity group producing state in the nation. It's also the second largest water user in the nation as well. It's all about water. And 97% of our water in Idaho is consumed and is used by irrigation and agricultural purposes. 3% is human consumption. It seems like that's a rather big number, but it is. I mean, it's all about water here in Idaho: water quantity, water quality, and soil health. And we're taking a really strong stand in soil health here in Idaho. We've just not too many years ago, probably less than 5 years ago, we didn't have very many no-till drills in our state. And to this day now we have over 30, and I think it's approaching 40 actually in our state. So no-till direct seed is really catching on here in Idaho, and the soil health, and I really contribute that to the education part of our job and getting out there and really talking and showing people that it works. Volunteer conservation works. Direct seeding and no-till works. You know, just be patient, and you'll reap the benefits from it. Well, I could share so much more about our exceptionally skilled staff and our partnerships and what we do here in Idaho. And I'm a little biased, I guess I'll just say, when it comes to Idaho. I really enjoy working in Idaho. We're not just about potatoes. I want to let you guys know that too. And that's what we're known for mainly, but I have a short video here of what Idaho provides and offers. It's 5 minutes. I think you'll enjoy it. I want to again thank you all for coming here, and after the video, I guess we'll go into our next presenter. But enjoy the video, enjoy your time here in Idaho, and nice to meet you all again. Have a good day.
When you think of Idaho, you probably think potatoes. It's true, our state is America's #1 potato producer. But Idaho is way more than just spuds. We grow and raise many things in the Gem State. Idaho has over 25,000 farms and ranches that specialize in 185 different commodities. Some folks are surprised to learn that we're first in the nation for trout production, second for growing alfalfa hay, and third for milk and cheese. All of the state's 500 plus dairies are family owned and produce hundreds of dairy products every day. Beef is also big in Idaho. So big, in fact, we have more cattle than people, and beef is the state's second largest agricultural industry. In addition to cattle, we raise over 250,000 sheep, which produce 5 million pounds of wool annually. That's enough wool to knit a sweater for every Idahoan. Our produce numbers are impressive too. We are second in the nation for sugar beets and third for growing mint. We rank top 10 for apples, peaches, plums, and cherries. Idaho is also a major producer of beans, peas, and lentils. Plus, we ship more than 1 billion pounds of onions from the growing region every year. Wheat is our specialty too, and is grown in 42 of our 44 counties. But that's not all. We also keep the wine and beverage industry well supplied. Idaho is home to more than 50 wineries. We are the #1 barley grower in the United States and 3rd in hop production. The next time you're shopping or dining out, look for the Idaho Preferred logo. It means your products are from one of the greatest states in the nation. Agriculture and food and beverage processing are central to Idaho's economy and generate 20% of our sales every year. We sell fruits, vegetables, grains, meats, dairy, and seeds all around the world, with exports exceeding $2 billion. And get this, if Idahoans had to consume all commodities produced within the state, each resident would have to eat 195 slices of bread, 49 potatoes, 2 pounds of cheese, 1.5 pounds of beef, 2 onions, and 3 cups of beans every day. So when you think of Idaho, think of the hardworking men and women who bring delicious products to your table. We are potatoes and so much more. We are Idaho.
I guess I'm feeling a little full after that last little bit of information. So happy to introduce the next speaker, Dr. Jody Johnson Maynard, who is Associate Dean at the University of Idaho for the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. The University of Idaho is also one of the hosts for this year's conference, and even though the main campus is located 300 miles north of here, the university does maintain a presence in all parts of the state, primarily through the extension activities. And I'll let Jody tell you a little bit more about that. I would like to point out, I don't know if she was going to tell you this, but she's a trained pedologist. So it's good to see people like that in positions like associate deans.
So thanks, Paul, and everybody. I appreciate everybody coming out. Lots of people here today, which is great. I also wanted to thank you all for letting me tag along on the field trip. As Paul mentioned, I do have a pedology background, so it was awesome to get back out. Nothing makes me more happy than going on field trips. It's great. So I wanted to add my words of welcome today to those that Curtis already gave you and talk a little bit about our great state of Idaho. But I thought I'd start, since it's morning and maybe you haven't had enough coffee yet, we'll do something a little bit more interactive. We have some small gifts up here from the College of Ag, and I thought we'd distribute a couple of these through trivia. So if you happen to work for the state of Idaho, or from the state of Idaho, consider yourself an ambassador this morning. You're not allowed to play. However, if somebody doesn't know the answer, then of course you can give them some hints. Not the answer, but hints. Okay, first up, what is Idaho's state bird? First hand.
Mountain bluebird?
Mountain bluebird, yeah. Come on up. So our beautiful mountain bluebird, which, as the name might clue you into, is more numerous in our mountain terrain, but a beautiful little bird. Second, what is Idaho's state tree? Not ponderosa pine. Not Douglas fir. Western white pine, excellent. A few images of the western white pine. Very large, somewhat slender tree. Okay, next one. Oh, wow, quick, over there. Way in back for you, Paul. State nickname. You already got it. The gem state, which is not just because we have gems. It's actually broadly interpreted as meaning abundant natural resources. But of course, the star garnet is our beautiful state gem as well. I think I have one more. What is Idaho state horse? We have one. Apple, who said it? Somebody over there. All right, the Appaloosa, which is a beautiful, strong, fast horse bred by the Nez Perce people that are around the Palouse area in Idaho. So we're very proud of our Appaloosas. If you ever come to Moscow, you can go to the Appaloosa Horse Museum and check that out. So that's a little bit about some of the fun things in Idaho. But Curtis kind of touched on this aspect of diversity. And I think if you look at the state, you'll see that. Of course, most people recognize the shape of Idaho, which I've heard described as both a pistol as well as a pork chop. Neither of which really convey the beauty of the state, but I think do a good job in giving you a mental image of what the shape of the state looks like. But if you just look at this map, you'll notice that there's a wide range in elevations from near sea level around Lewiston, Idaho, all the way to over 12,000 feet at Mount Bora, 12,667, right? Paul, you climbed that. It felt more like 15,000, right? So we have a wide range in elevation as well as in climate. Mean annual precipitation, including rain and snow, ranges from a little over 7 inches in the southwestern part of the state all the way up to probably over 100 or about 120 in the northern part of the state. So lots of gradients in climate, lots of different terrains and different landforms. And I tried to think of some of my most favorite places in the state of Idaho to highlight today. There's so many beautiful different types of landscapes, it was really hard to pick. So I just picked some, and maybe some you're not that familiar with, starting with the Bruneau Sand Dunes, again in the kind of more southwestern part of the state. The Shoshone Falls, which are quite beautiful and maybe about the same drop or a little bit more as Niagara Falls. So if you have time on this trip, please go check those out. Craters of the Moon National Monument is sort of a Martian-like experience, but quite beautiful. Mount Bora, which I mentioned, is the highest peak in the state. Again, a beautiful landscape. Going up to northern Idaho, we have Lake Coeur d'Alene, and the picture here is from Lake Pend Oreille. Again, some really, really pretty, heavily forested landscapes. And of course, one of my favorite being from the Moscow area is the Palouse region, which is really known for its rolling hills. Green in this picture because it's spring, right? When all the winter wheat is growing, they'll turn a lovely brown color, which is soil scientists, right? We tend to like that color. So really beautiful landscape formed from loess deposition and also pretty powerful erosional forces over time. So just a great diversity in different types of landscapes and ecosystems to experience. It took me about 6 hours to drive from Moscow down to Boise, and in that 6 hours you get to go through a lot of that different type of scenery. So we do appreciate our natural resources in the state. With all that diversity in climate, and landforms and parent materials, which we talked a little bit about on the field trip yesterday, we get a diversity of soil types. So in the southern Idaho, we have everything from our iridosols and our sandy entosols, all the way to northern Idaho, where we have some really, really beautiful spodosols formed in volcanic ash, and even some acreage of histosols. So we have very diverse soil resources. We have 10 of the 12 soil orders just located within the state. Some of them are a little bit hard to find, but that always makes field trips really interesting as well. All these soils lead to a great productivity. And some of these things were mentioned in the video that was shown just this morning. But we are number 1 in potatoes and food-sized trout, number 2 in barley, sugar beets, peppermint, and alfalfa hay. Number 3 in hops, milk, and cheese. So these products that we produce have spurred different industries within the state. We have nearly 60 craft breweries and over 50 wineries and distilleries. I just recently actually saw a map in my newspaper Saturday morning before I left to drive down here. And it has a nice map of over 68 breweries that you can go visit within the state. So they seem to be popping up all the time, which is really cool. And of course, we, because of our dairy industry, we have 1.6 million people with 2.1 million cows. So it's the way a lot of Idahoans like it. Fewer people, more animals. A little bit about the University of Idaho. It was founded in 1889, which is actually 1 year before Idaho became a state officially. We have about 12,000 students enrolled in 85 undergrad majors and about 93 graduate majors. And we are, of course, the state's land-grant institution. So we have the mission of teaching, research, as well as extension. When it comes to extension, the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences plays a big role. And our college was actually the first college established within the University of Idaho. We offer 39 graduate and undergraduate programs. One of those, an important one of those, is soil science, which exists at both the undergrad and the graduate level. We are actually in the midst of forming a new soil and water department at the University of Idaho. Soils was a very small part of a very, very mega large department, which was larger than some other colleges. So soil and water are getting together and forming our own department as of July 1. So we're going through a transition, but I think that it's really exciting and really important that we're actively promoting and building our soil science program within the institution. We run the Idaho Agricultural Experiment Station, and as Paul mentioned, we have research stations across the state. So we really are actively working and meeting the needs of our stakeholders. We have over 4,000 acres within the college that we use for research and teaching purposes. And overall, we really, really pride ourselves on our hands-on learning experiences that we provide to the students. And I think these resources that we have as a land-grant institution and a College of Agriculture really allow us to shine in that area. So I also have a video to share with you today. So I'll leave you with that. But before I do, I just wanted to repeat that Idaho, from what you've seen this morning and what you saw on the field trip, we really do rely on our natural resources. And protecting those natural resources is really a point of pride with most Idahoans. So we thank you for all the important work that you do across the nation, and are glad that you're all here with us today.
Jody will be out in the hall with application materials if anybody's interested. So we also have some welcoming remarks from national leadership, and I guess Dave Limbo is going to be wearing two hats here, both for the NRCS national leadership and also Soil Survey Division. So you get twice the time.
Twice the time.
Yeah.
That's Maynard, would that be good?
I think this one, right?
Can folks hear me if I'm down here?
We can always hear
Yes.
you.
Okay. I figured you probably could. I hate standing up at the podium, and that's gonna mess up our folks in the back.
We can't stream it then, David.
Oh, please.
And there's a nation out there waiting.
Oh, this nation. I hate being up here on a podium. So let me see if we can get this going. I have to find out which one. Well, it was here. We lost it. No, of course not. Oh, yeah. Hey, this. The nation's watching. Yep, the nation's watching, and I am messing up. So, get used to it, everybody. You guys get that back out? Can't find it. I put it on the desktop. Didn't we? I thought.
Well, David's following around, I want to remind folks that we are live streaming this conference. That's what the cameras are doing in the back. I've had reports already from folks across the country that are tuned in and are watching this. I think we're reaching a large audience with this. We're good. Stall for David.
Oh, I'm going to let you stall as long as you want. I'm ready anytime, though. All right, so, yeah, I am the director of the Soil Science Division. Been on board, let's see, since 2015, so not quite 2 years yet. About 6 years ago, I was standing up in front of you all as the person who put one of these things together in Asheville, North Carolina in 2011. So I want to start by thanking Paul for what you did. I know what you've gone through. For Sean, what you've put up with, and for Christy, who made it all happen. So thank you all. They all deserve a round of applause. So just start there. Also, give me a sense of who's here. Everybody who is with NRCS, raise your hand. Okay, just a few of you. Okay, universities, and I should say university professors or staff. All right, now university students, grad students, undergraduate students. Okay, we've got a few of those. Okay, other federal employees, our cooperators, great. State employees, other people who love soils. Okay, all of you should be raising your hand on that one. All right, so there we have a diverse audience, granted a little bit of NRCS, so hopefully, again, you'll get some takeaways from this. So to start, we'll talk a little bit about some of the highlights from the Soil Science and Resource Assessment Deputy area. We have a new acting Deputy Chief, Dave Smith, retired just before this conference. We tried to get him out here for it, but unfortunately he retired Saturday. So Mary Podol is the acting Deputy Chief. She's the state con from North Dakota, so we're looking forward to having her on board. Another thing that has been taking some of our time within the division, but also within NRCS, is the science of soil health. You heard earlier about the importance of soil health, and it is an important part of what NRCS is doing. It is indeed a concept that is NRCS-wide. It is not just one division. It is not just two divisions. It is not just one deputy area. It is part of NRCS, and it will be for quite a while. So right now, this project is a collaboration between three of the deputy areas under the Associate Chief for Conservation, Program Science and Technology, and SSRA. And it's been broken into 8 functional teams listed here. And what I've done is put on them, and although you can only see one of the markers, the light here, the division that is in charge of each part of this. So it is split between the Soil Science Division, my division, and the Soil Health Division, as well as programs getting involved. It was important that programs wanted to make sure they had good field indicators. So they're looking at developing and promoting the field indicators. Just because one division is there as the lead, that does not mean it is the only division working on it. It is a cooperative effort. We're working together. We meet at least monthly, if not weekly, to move this forward. One of the things, though, to just highlight quickly is we're going to be doing some field studies, and this will be involved with our cooperators looking at long-term effects of soil health so that we can come up with the indicators that will be used to assess soil health. So again, this is for us a great step forward. We're moving in this direction, and hopefully we'll be able to get some answers very, very soon. With that, Soil Science Division. This past year has been the year of strategic plans. So how many of you have ever worked on a strategic plan? How many of you enjoyed it? Everybody who's in my division should say yes, just making that clear. Okay, they are useful, they are needed. We're going to hear about the Cooperative Soil Survey Strategic Plan shortly. I believe on Wednesday, we'll hear a little bit more about the Soil Science Strategic Plan. I encourage you to listen, ask questions, but this is our roadmap forward. In a lot of cases, a plan is not a plan unless you understand how you got there. So it is critical that we understand how we got there and the fact that we are going to use these to move forward. It helps to focus us. I'll talk a little bit about some of the project highlights for the last year, where we've been, but also where we're going. So tomorrow morning there will be a talk. Chad Remley will go over some of the regional projects. I do want to just say, for the folks that work in the regions, the field people, the regional directors, you guys are the ones that put out the data, the information that everybody uses. You're the backbone not only of the division, but of NRCS. Our previous chief has said that many times. So it's critical what you do. And I do know, for those who haven't heard, over the last year we've had some issues with budget. Anybody heard that? Anybody? Yes? No? Okay, so maybe you have. But you've been able to do amazing things with a limited budget. Unfortunately, what that means is you're probably going to continue to do amazing things with a limited budget. It's not going to change a lot. We did this year look at the RACA data, revise it, get a new report out based on laboratory information, laboratory data. This is probably the most comprehensive data set on carbon in the world. It was presented at the FAO conference in Rome in March, and again, it is one of the best data sets that's available, and we should all be proud of that. For all of you who worked on it, for better or worse, complained a little bit now and then. I actually, when I was at NC State, worked on it in analyzing some of the data. Handbooks. Sitting in the back, holding up the walls, Curtis Monger deserves a lot of credit for getting handbooks out, especially the revised Soil Survey Handbook. So again, great job there. Has everybody got a copy of that? Has everybody got a copy of that? Okay, if not, see Curtis. Okay, we will have a workshop tomorrow on Handbook 296, so please attend that. That's going to be the next big revision. We do need your input there. The mid-range infrared project is something that the Kellogg Lab, along with some folks with our interp staff and our research staff, has been working on. Again, has some great potential. Taking some of the things that we've learned from RACA and the near-infrared, looking at mid-range infrared and its potential to soil survey. And again, I think we have some great opportunities to move forward with that. For anybody who will be going to the Soil Science Society of America meeting this year, there will be a presentation about that. I encourage you to ask questions, look for it, and again, Dave Hoover can give you more information on that. The Soil Fragility Index, again, looking at our interp staff and being able to interpret soil vulnerability, soil interpretation to help with planning. Again, another one of our accomplishments this year. The last two are ongoing, NEON sampling and the National Wetland Condition Assessment sampling. These are ongoing. This is adding to our database. Again, anytime we can add point data, we'll take it. With NEON, there's also some discussion about being a repository for storing samples. And again, long-term storage of soil samples. We already do that extensively at our Lincoln facility, the National Cooperative Soil Survey Center, or National Soil Survey Center. So this will expand that. And I think, again, another opportunity that we have. So we're doing a lot of things. But let's move forward. Okay, it's great to sit and talk about what we've done, but let's think about where we're going. So moving forward, a lot of you in here, since you're NRCS employees, have heard of SDJR, right? Nod or moan, okay? It's over as far as an initiative, but it's still part of what we do. It's still how we will go to the next step, which is continuing to do updates. Will we ever be finished? That's a question. It requires a response. No. So what we will be doing is updates, targeted updates. We heard a little about that, at least on the bus that I was on yesterday and the one in the field, that updates are going to be needed constantly. We learn more. We can apply more information, better information to create a better product. I've already mentioned Handbook 296. This is ongoing. It needs to be done not only through us, but with our cooperators to make sure that we're all working together. Provisional ecological sites, we have an initiative. They will be completed by 2020 for the lower 48 states, for all U.S. by 2025. This has been presented multiple times to our chief. The idea that these are going to be used, both the provisional and the full ESDs, the ecological site descriptions, will be used extensively in conservation planning. So we need to continue to work on that, and we will. And we'll eventually have soils data for all of the U.S. by 2026. That's my goal, right? And I think we can do it. I want to stress this may not look exactly like what we see everywhere today, but we will have data for all parts of the U.S. in 10 years. All right? We have to do it. If we don't, somebody else will. And we have the best data set out there. We know what to do, what we're doing. We know how to do it. We will continue to do it. So we're pushing. Yes, we will. Okay? Still moving forward. We need an enhanced web presence. Okay? For both what we're doing in research, so that folks know where we're going, what we're doing, how they can interact. The focus teams, that's part of our Soils 2026. We'll have websites so that folks, again, have better ideas to what's going on within the division and how to work with the teams. There'll be more about the focus teams Wednesday morning, so again, please attend that session if you have additional questions. Conference materials and committees. So I've been a cooperator when I was at NC State, now part of the Cooperative Soil Survey as with the division. How many of you find the websites easy to navigate? Okay, Dave, you're biased on that. Dave, so could we do better? Again, that's a question. Could we do better? So we will, and we're going to need input. I think we'll hear a little bit more, actually a lot more, about that when the strategic plan and the communications team for NCSS talks in a little bit. But the materials needs to be more accessible. I mean, I tried to find stuff even from last year's regionals, and I couldn't find it easily on the website, and that was to prepare for this week. The committees. Committees, I always felt, and again, I'm talking personally from experience at NC State, the committees would get a flurry of activity and then they would kind of go away, disappear, be quiet. That, if we're going to continue to do what we need to do, we have to keep active. We have to keep people knowing what we're doing. One way is with a web presence. Which brings me to the Cooperative Soil Survey, what we're all here for today. Part of it is looking at taxonomic changes. There's going to be a meeting Tuesday afternoon, unfortunately concurrent with the Ag Handbook 296, but talking about fundamental changes in soil taxonomy. There have been multiple proposals. We need to discuss them more and move forward with some of these changes. To try to help to do that within the division, we're trying to fund annual taxonomy meetings that will be focused on one change, one aspect. That was Curtis Monger had that idea. It's a great thing. We need to go back to doing that. So getting folks together annually to look at one aspect. So hopefully we can continue to do that. Another part is research projects, and I'll talk again to the research committee later this afternoon. But one of the ideas is through the Cooperative Soil Survey, there'll be research needs that will be put forward. Through our initiative process, through NRCS, Soil Science Division, we want to fund those. We want to fund one of them, maybe two, but rather than funding small amounts, funding a multi-state or multi-institution, multi-group of cooperators to work on a project. That type of project needs to be brought forward through the research committee. So this is really pulling that research committee, making them more important, making that so that we can actually use that brain trust that we have there to move us forward. So the expectations, we need to be flexible. We need to look internal and external. We need to have the authoritative product. Okay? We need to be national in scope. No holes, no gaps. And again, be useful in what we do. There are expectations. We want to deal with knowledge. We want to use maps rather than just focus on making them. We want to look at services. Even our new Secretary of Agriculture looks at what we do in the department as service-oriented, customer service-oriented. We need relations, not just point data. We have to get the point data, but we need to bring it into relational databases. Continuously updating, continuously improving. We are never going to be done. We never want to be done in that regards, or we can end up like the Canadian Soil Survey or the British Soil Survey. They don't exist to the way they did previously. So we need to continually improve. We need to look at projects rather than acres. I've heard that, and I think that is definitely the way we have to go. We have to think of putting things together and not use acres as our goals, look at it as projects. Focus on what the need is. The need is not necessarily acres, it's how does it relate to what we do. And we need to do training, both internal and external. Our folks need to constantly be trained. We have to be able to support that. So to succeed, cooperation. We all know what budgets are doing. Is there anybody whose budget is increasing? No. So how do we do everything that I've said and still move forward? To me, it's cooperate. We can do more together than we can singularly. So it's more and more working together. Cooperators need to talk to the division needs to talk to cooperators. We need to work together to move us forward. MOUs, whatever projects we have, we've got to move forward that way. We need to be innovative. Times are changing. If we do things the way we did it 20 years ago, we're not going to be able to continue to do what we're doing. So we need to be innovative. Where does innovation come from? Again, that's the question for all of you. Where does it come from? And I'm not moving forward until somebody says something. Where does it come from? At all levels. The new GS5 can give you just as much of an innovation as the GS15. Notice I am excluding the senior executives. So everybody can be innovative, and everybody has to be innovative. We're not going to be able to do things the way we've been doing them in the past. So the willingness to be different. Okay, different is good. Yeah, okay, it's a great catchphrase. It's on a T-shirt, but it's true. We must move forward. That means being different. That means thinking differently. Different is good. Change is inevitable. I think we've seen that in the last probably 6 months. Is that a fair statement for everybody? Change is inevitable. It's going to happen. And it's scary, right? Maybe? No? Judging from the fact that there's not a lot of comments out there, probably scaring you a little bit. That's good, because now we can respond to it. Recognize it, move us forward. And we've got to continue to do that, or we will cease to exist. So with that, probably don't have time for questions. I will be around all this week talking a lot, unfortunately. You'll be sick of hearing me if you aren't already. But let me know if you have questions. If I don't hear from you, and my staff has heard this before, if I don't hear from you, you agree with me. Right? So I want to hear comments. With that, Paul? All right. Thank you.
So now we are going to move from the national level to the more local level. Very pleased this morning to have Josie Erskine, who is the chair of the Ada County Soil and Water Conservation District, who is also one of the sponsoring agencies of this year's conference. Josie, do you need anything?
No, this is great.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Josie, and I'm not the chair. I'm the manager of the Soil and Water Conservation District here in Ada County. That's where you are, and I am honored to be here because I am the different thing today. I have prepared a poem and a song. I am not a soil scientist. I am a theater major that is good at promoting your message. I can tell it. In fact, Sean will tell you that I have taken the tabletop rain simulator to over 1,700 people in Ada County in 2017, and I'm not done. I'm also an organic farmer. You're going to come visit my farm, and I'm a cider maker, and you will drink my cider on Thursday night, maybe. I mean, there'll be wine too, and you can like wine more, and we can talk all about that. I'm a native Idahoan. In fact, my family's genealogy says that my family was one of the first families on a wagon train to come into Idaho from the state of Utah. So all of these facts about Idaho, they've left out that we have the largest roadless area in the lower 48. And in fact, we have more hot water than Oregon, Utah, and Wyoming combined in the state of Idaho. So I really think that Idaho is the gem state. My district is urbanizing at an incredible rate. I speak all around the valley about soil, the importance that we know, the importance that we're just discovering, and the importance that we still have left to discover. That's your job. You discover those importances. You tell me. I work with farmers, I work with schools, I work with counties and cities, and I try to have them understand that soil is important. Right now, our district, we host youth days. We are the first no-till drill that was purchased in the state of Idaho to rent out, and now we have 2. And a roller crimper. We sponsor large restoration projects. In fact, you're going to go visit 2 of our projects, the Ada County projects, on your field trips on Thursday. We're in the process of creating a demonstration farm with NRCS and a small farm incubating trainer incubator training farmer program with the University of Idaho. So, right now, as farmland disappears, Idaho has no farmland preservation or protection program in the state. So we are fighting tooth and nail to even try to save any farmland in what you're in Ada County. And I'm not really liked right now by the county. In fact, the Ada County just denied funding of the Ada Soil and Water Conservation District because this face shows up to a lot of hearings when large tracts of ag land are going out with full soil surveys. And I make a presentation of what they're going to lose, how much soil, how long it took to make that soil, how much ag is in the area. Over and over I am at those hearings, letting people know what's lost. So, a farm next to me is being developed. And I wrote a slam poem about it. This is a beautiful farm, 1,500 acres, 5,000 in rangeland. It's 11 miles from here. 20 head of elk overwintered on this property. It has cougar, it has wolf, it has black bear, it has an endangered species, red-banded trout on it. It has 72 inches of topsoil, which you will not find in this area. It has 3 artesian springs. One of them is 110 degrees coming out of the ground. It has an aquifer. It is the first farm in Ada County, has historical record. It will be gone in 5 years, and it's only 11 miles away from here. So when the vote came down of poop, we'll let this go through, I wrote a slam poem. And I'm going to present it, which is kind of out of place, but a group like this, I think, can appreciate something like this. We sold our souls, our soil. You fools, 66 inches of sandy loam, silt, loam, clay, minerals, a web. You pull one string. It's been left out of your science books. 30,000 years to create, erosion, time. It's an old growth forest. You can't see it because it's flipped upside down. What's an aggregate? Glomalin, detritosphere, symbiotic relationship. What's the carbon cycle? Your life depends on these words, and your ignorance is on display. You fools. What is the largest being on this planet, and where does it reside? What holds more life in a tablespoon than the humans on this planet? 6 feet under. The most complex ecosystem on this planet that all other ecosystems hinge upon. Yet it has little protection. You don't give it any voice. Where's its nonprofit? Time, erosion, fungus, bacteria, nematodes, microbiology, activity, biology, yet you treat it with sides. Pesticide, herbicide, fungicide, you kill the very thing that all life forth springs from. It's our soul. It's our soil. It's our soul, soil, soil. Why do these words sound the same? Because they are. Going once, going twice, sold. What foolish souls, you just sold our soil. So that's my poem, and I know this room can appreciate that. And the one thing you didn't learn about Idaho was our state song. So I'm kind of rough, and it's early in the morning, but I will let you know our state song. And here we have Idaho winning her way to fame, silver and gold in the sunlight's glaze, and romance lies in her name. And I'll go singing, singing of you, all proudly too. All my life through I'll go singing, singing of you, singing of Idaho. I will see you on Thursday. You get to visit me at my farm. We're going to dig a pit, and I'll show you the wonderful jungle that I grow. And then I'll see you Thursday night at my friend Brad McIntyre's farm as we have a Basque feast, which was my idea. You can thank me when we get there. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for what you do, your persistence. Voluntary conservation is beautiful in every aspect. And from someone who's on the ground as a farmer, but spreading your message, go team. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Wow. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit now and talk about something a little more technical. Kurt, I don't think you're going to sing. We hope not to. A lot of you that were on the field trip yesterday had a chance to meet Kurt Othberg. He's a retired geologist was with the Idaho Geological Survey, the University of Idaho. And we were very happy to have him along yesterday. He has spent quite a bit of his career working in the Boise area. And if you want to know anything about the soils and geology of this area, he is the person to talk to. And he will also be along on the field trip on Thursday as well. So what we thought might be appropriate is to have Kurt give a little bit of an overview of the Western Snake River Plain here. So, do you have PowerPoint loaded?
It's right on the screen.
I'll let you drive here.
Sorry, it's on the desktop.
Yeah, look at this.
Actually, I decided to do the whole state, not just the Western Snake River Plain. I really feel privileged to participate in this, and the field trip yesterday was amazing and gave me a chance to find out about your interests. And what I want to say about this talk is I'm going to say some things about the diversity of Idaho geology, and I think it follows pretty nicely after Josie's presentation. These are going to be highlights, and so I encourage you during this week, and I'll be on the field trip on Thursday. If you have some particular interest in the geology of Idaho, please come and talk to me about that. Be happy to share my knowledge. So I'm going to make sure, I'm going to face this screen. And I have a green button. So Idaho has very diverse geology, and there are a number of reasons for that. And that ties very closely with its physiography, and I'll be showing some images to portray that. And so just to sketch through it, there's a lot of time. Geology is about time, as well as terrains and lithology. So we're going to touch on some of the important Precambrian rocks, and then there's some Paleozoic marine rocks. There's this amazing story about accretion of oceanic island arc crust that joined Idaho. Then finalize talking about Cenozoic volcanism and faulting. Then get to the Snake River Plain, talk about the difference between the eastern plain and the western plain. And then a really interesting part of it that finally gets us back to the soils is the story about climate change that was important in this part of the country. This is it's this amazing map of North America. It's called Time and Terrain. This does not show lithology. It shows the distribution of rocks by time and then the kinds of terrains that those form. And the main thing I want to point out is this area up here, and these are some of the oldest rocks that you can find in North America. This is the ancient North American continent. Geologists call it a Kraton. And the only reason I have this here is that we're going to see the big perspective and then go to this part of North America where Idaho is located. And so since almost the beginning on the planet, when continents first existed, this has been a feature that's persisted. And you notice it's broad, not looking too complex. But over here on this side, there's a lot going on, and Idaho's right in the middle of it. Just to give you an overview of time, because I'm using time jargon, for this talk, we will be looking at this part of the Precambrian, and then a little bit about the Paleozoic, activity in the Mesozoic, especially the Cretaceous, and then in the Cenozoic, I'm going to be concentrating on the Miocene and Pliocene. So I was looking, Jody had great pictures of Idaho. We're talking about its shape, and these are political boundaries. And of course, nobody cares about the geology and the soils when they're doing political boundaries. Well, maybe they do. But anyway, it's just kind of fortuitous, right? You have a political boundary, and so what does that enclose in terms of geology and soils? And so Idaho actually shares its border with 6 states plus Canada. And in this Google Earth image, which you've already seen in Jody's talk, you start to see that physiography. Whoops, wrong buttons, sorry. You start to see that physiography that characterizes Idaho and how it fits in with this northwest region of this complex geology that's on the western edge of this ancient Kraton. And this landform, this is a digitally constructed landform map. These things really show up beautifully. And I'll be going through features. This is the northern Rocky Mountains, the Columbia Plateau, the obvious Snake River Plain, the backbone of Idaho. Some people call it the Salmon River Mountains. We're also part of the Great Basin here and the Basin Range Mountains. This is what the recent geologic map of Idaho put out by the Idaho Geological Survey. And in that, now you can see this relationship of these are lithologies, time and lithologies in here. And you can start to see the relationship between that physiography and the geology that's been mapped. And so these same patterns, like the Basin and Range, this is the backbone of the central Idaho mountains, and the Snake River Plain. Just to state a few of the examples. This is also a time and terrain map of just the contiguous United States. The thing I want to point out here is the distribution of these Precambrian metasedimentary rocks. So now we're going to go back in ancient times, and Idaho has significant deposits of these, and they formed this dark area right up in here in North Idaho. And a lot of it is shared with Montana. And so here's a distribution of these, this is called the belt supergroup. They're about 1.47 billion years old. And this is what they look like. This is a thinly bedded, massive amounts. In some places, it's 18 kilometers thick. What's amazing about this is there's no land plants on the planet when these were deposited. So for geologists, like the present is the key to the past, this strains the imagination. How do you understand sedimentary processes when there's absolutely no vegetation on the planet? So geologists have worked with that, and there's a lot of good hypotheses, but it's hard to prove the details. But there's some striking things like the ripple marks that are very common in the sandy facies of these rocks. And there's some evidence of life in the planet at that time, and these things are called stromatolites. They're probably algal mats that formed in, as you can imagine, they form in places today. But that was about the extent that we know about life nearly 2 billion years ago. One of the interesting things is that there's some trying to match these kinds of rocks with other places in the world. And so there's very similar rocks over in Siberia. And so one of the suggestions in the research of this is that this old Kraton, where these rocks were forming on the western side of it, split off in a tectonic rift due to plate tectonics. I mean, long time ago. And because the similar rocks are found in Eastern Asia now. The other thing that happened is then it opened up an ocean and led to the Paleozoic deposition of marine rocks. And this is just a quick look at this time and terrain. These marine rocks are exposed, especially down in this area, and it's an important oil and gas resource of western Wyoming. And actually, I haven't found any of that oil and gas in Idaho, but the rocks are there. These are best exposed because of more recent tectonism in the basin and range. So they're exposed in the Great Basin to the south, and then in these rocks where the faulting has brought these rocks up and exposed them. So it's pretty cool because there's a lot of limestone. It's how we understand that it was marine. Many of these limestones are full of fossils, and in this case, this is supposed to be a close-up to show the common horn corals and crinoids that were some of the kinds of life that lived in this Paleozoic marine condition. And then the other thing that happened to these rocks is that later in the Mesozoic, they were involved in when there was compression of the crust, and so it's a fold and thrust belt now, and so this is up in the Lost River Range close to Bora Peak, and you can see some of these amazing folds that these rocks have. And that's part of why it's such a wonderful place to take students, because these things are so visible in Idaho. Okay, I'm moving on. This is all pretty rapid, but that's okay. The break comes right after this. So in the Mesozoic, another amazing thing happened is that we had a subduction zone going on the edge of the continent. And there's one now out in the Pacific out here, but at that time, it was right here. And so there's the edge of the continent, North American continent, was about like that. And then oceanic, in the subduction zone, oceanic crust was brought over and subducted underneath the continent. And so if one of these island arcs that, like we have out in the Pacific today, happens to come along, rafted along, it will actually run into the continent. And we have an amazing example of that where those island arc rocks are now attached to the continent. And we call that accretion. And so this is where Hell's Canyon's located, and these are the Wallowa Mountains of Oregon. And on yesterday's trip, when we were clear up that high point, some of us could see the snow-capped Wallowa Mountains. So you need to see more about these. This is a graph that sort of portrays how this accretion occurred. It's broken up in what we call different terrains, different ages. But this is all Mesozoic tectonism and underplating. And anyway, it brought these amazing rocks and connected them to the continent. And it's in Hell's Canyon. This shows where these rocks are now located on the Idaho geologic map. And of course, in Oregon is a lot more of it. They're best exposed in Hell's Canyon, one of the most amazing features in North America. And it's part of what makes Idaho geology so great. Now, this is a fun place to go. Best way is by boat, but you can see the geology of this accreted terrain. Okay, moving on, we're still in the Mesozoic, but now we're getting into the end of the Mesozoic, and we're going to be looking at the central Idaho mountains, which is the backbone of Idaho, and it's really mostly composed of the rocks of the Idaho batholith. And that's all that pink color. And in this physiographic map, you can see this mass, and because it's almost monolithologic, it's a lot more uniform in its physiographic features. And this is what the rocks of the batholith look like. We saw a lot of that yesterday. We saw a lot of the grus between these tors where the granitic rocks are so weathered they turn to grus and they create the sandy soils. And a close-up, there's both granite and granodiorite. Where we were yesterday was a biotite granodiorite. It's because of the biotite that it weathers so readily. But also there's a lot of spectacular scenery up in the high mountains. Many of those areas were heavily glaciated when we had glacial climates, and some spectacular scenery because of the glaciation. Okay, moving on, we're going into the Cenozoic. I just said it's the faulting and the volcanism. It's mainly going to be two features that we're going to look at. One is the Columbia Plateau, and then the Snake River Plain. Okay, the Columbia Plateau is mostly in eastern Washington. Idaho shares the eastern part of it, and then Oregon. There's some of it in Oregon. I was asked yesterday about lava flows. We were out in an area of shield volcanoes, and the shield volcanoes, when they erupt, this is pretty fluid, and the comparison was with Hawaiian lavas, and they come out in lobes. And so it'll blurp out and run out in lobes, and another one will come out, and it slowly builds the shield volcano. This is a different animal altogether. Most of the eruptions happened over here in the corner between Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And yet, some of the single eruptions formed these relatively thin flows. They were so fluid that they made it all the way out to the coast. And so time after time after time in this period of mainly in 17 to 14 and a half million years ago, these eruptions took place and completely transformed the physiography of this part of Northwest. In Idaho, they appear right in here. And in the canyons where they're best exposed, this is what they look like. Flow after flow after flow of basalt. And in this particular picture, you can see one of the feeder dikes of some of the later eruptions, because it cuts right through older ones. Okay, then we're to the Snake River Plain. The smile on Idaho's map. And most physiographic descriptions talk about the plain in a geographic sense in terms of it's a plateau and it has a certain characteristic vegetation and climate to go with that. But geologists see it as two distinct features. And I think you can start to pick that out in this wonderful digitally derived landform map. The eastern plain actually extends down into Oregon. The western plain is right here, and it's smaller and has a different origin. So I'm going to go through those origins. The geology, on the geologic map, you can see some of the differences. The eastern plain actually the northeastern end of it is Yellowstone. So Idaho shares a little bit of that, even though most of Yellowstone's Wyoming. Geologically, Idaho has a piece of that. And then extends all the way down like this. And these are rhyolites. And this actually has a lot of rhyolite at depth, but is now covered with these shield volcanoes. But the thickness of the shield volcanoes is pretty thin. This is Craters of the Moon, which Jody mentioned is a place you should try to visit. On the other hand, the Western Snake River Plain is mostly sediment, but it does have some basalt, very young basalts that we saw some of those shield volcanoes yesterday that just come out in the center of it. So this is a diagram that came out in a book actually a long time ago, but it's pretty amazing. This is the northeastern part of the Snake River Plain. This is the Yellowstone today. This is where the hot spot is located underneath North American continent right now, is at Yellowstone. And the hot spot creates a lot of crustal heat, and it causes swelling. And because of the swelling, the crust stretches, and then it faults into basin and range faulting. What's great about this, it shows that there's decreasing age in this direction, and it shows all these faults. And most of these are active. The most active ones, of course, closest to Yellowstone. One of these ranges is the Lost River Range, and this is Mount Bora, the 13,000 plus, the highest place in Idaho. And this is the fault scarp that formed in 1982 in the very large earthquake. I think it was magnitude 7.2. And that's graphic evidence of the rising of the mountains and the dropping of the valley. This picture shows the range in ages from down in Oregon. We have, imagine Yellowstone right there 14 million years ago. That's what you need to imagine. And we have the evidence in the rocks. And these rocks are what we call, they're the result, ignimbrites is the jargon, sorry. They're the result of massive eruption and they're really scary. And we have those here at 12 million, there in the 12 to 6, there at 10, 6, 1, 2.6. And the scary thing is that up in here, it looks like we're due. Okay, so the last eruption out of Yellowstone dumped ash on Nebraska. Think about it. Okay, in contrast to this progression of what looks like hotspot volcanism is the Western Plain, and this is actually some outlines of the extent of sedimentary deposits associated with the Western Plain, which instead of being very volcanic at the time it was forming, is really, it was being faulted and subsided, and so it screwed up the drainage. Everything started draining into it, and we had sediments deposited there. This is just a tectonic map that shows the Western Plain and some of the faults. And we were looking at some of the effects of those faults yesterday on the field trip, and Thursday we'll go out to the other side of the plain, and we'll see some good features there. Yeah, so when this tectonism was happening here, we have volcanism, a lot of volcanism and faulting in southeastern Oregon. And people have studied mainly the fish fossils in these sediments in the Western Plain. And the older ones are associated with the kinds of fish in what they call the Humboldt River drainage that goes out into California. At some point, probably about 2 million years ago, the drainage in here was captured through Hell's Canyon, and then the fish have Columbia River affinities. So it's a pretty cool story. Once Hell's Canyon was cut, then the filling of this basin, the Western Snake River Plain, with fine-grained sediments, including lake sediments and nearshore sediments and floodplain and fluvial, that stopped, and we started having an incision. And this coincides pretty closely with the major global climate change in the late Pliocene into the Pleistocene, and the starting of the cycles of glacial climate that's gone over and over and over again over the last about 2.5 million years. So I want to talk about the evidence for this change in climate. And so associated with the Columbia River basalt in the late Miocene and into the early Pliocene, we have, like, for instance, these leaf fossils from the Clarkia fossil beds, famous fossil beds in North Idaho. These leaf fossils indicate a vegetation more like we see in the southeast U.S. This is a photo of a plinthite that Paul McDaniel collected right there in Moscow, Idaho. You can talk with him about the significance of the plinthite. But again, I think this represents something more like we see in the southeast United States today in terms of climate. So it's warm and moist. And if you go in the Snake River Plain, we have the famous Hagerman fossil beds. And the assemblage of fossils in there, and the horse fossils are probably the most famous, indicates a pretty lush environment. Also, in the same area by Hagerman, we found these buried ultrasols. They're buried by younger sediments and younger basalts. So that's in great contrast to what we see in Pleistocene in the Western Snake River Plain. So pretty early in the Pleistocene, the climate changed to sagebrush steppe, and we started getting aeridosols. And there's just some examples of some of the topography. I hit the wrong one again. And then the Adurapan near Wilder, Idaho, which is not too far from Hagerman. And then we had this view yesterday, and I was glad we went up in that one place and we could see this view because it's very similar to what shows on this slide, so I can reiterate it. This is looking from up there, actually from Table Rock. We were pretty close to Table Rock. The city of Boise is mainly here. Because of the lighting, this is the 10-mile terrace we saw yesterday, and then some of the sequence of terraces that comes down, and the ages we have because of age control through dating basalts. So the 10-mile terrace is about 1.6 early Pleistocene, and then down to close to 1 million, and then over 500,000, and then the one that's has some of the earliest evidence of Durapan development is about a little older than 107,000, probably relates to the glaciation that was about 130,000. And this is just kind of a schematic cross profile across those, shows the different terraces and the development of soils from the Boise River here. We have a Boise terrace with most of the city of Boise sits on this terrace, and it has evidence for calcic horizon. The first incipient Durapan development on the Whitney at about 130,000, and then the Durapans get more and more developed as you get into the older surfaces. I think that's going to be it with this last picture we saw. This is the Chilcot, but this is the site that's really close to Bonneville Point. And I was telling people yesterday that at this site in the railroad cut, you can see the loess parent material underneath the Durapan, and it has cicada nodules in it. That's a very useful site to see. And then that's at about 1.6 million years old, and then the 300,000-year-old Sunrise Terrace gives you an example of the variation over time. I think that's it. I look forward to seeing more of this and talking about the geology of Western Snake River Plain on Thursday. Thank you very much.
So next on the agenda, we're scheduled for a 30-minute break, and I'm going to ask that everybody be back in here by 11 o'clock? 10 o'clock, sorry. Those of us on the Pacific time zone always get messed up when we come down to Boise. A couple of announcements. The poster boards are up, right, Christy? And for those of you that have posters, you can go ahead and put them on display. It's going to be in the Aspen room, which is down this hallway to your right. Hang another right, and you'll see the Aspen room there. The doors are open, the poster boards are inside. And what we're going to ask you to do is the people who have the posters on the MLRAs, I think in the abstract book for that you got in your conference packet, those are numbered 1 through 12. And there should be poster boards down there numbered 1 through 12, right, Christy? Okay, she's nodding. And so those are the only ones that we're going to ask you to put in a particular place. The rest of them, we kind of do this on first come, first served basis. So if you don't want to be in the far corner, get down there early and get your poster up. Okay, and the way the poster boards are set up, you should be able to fit 2 of them side by side on each board. So with that, if you guys want to take 25 minutes here and quick break, and then we'll reconvene here.